The Dangote Refinery, that was just an ambitious dream, is now becoming one of the most influential energy assets in the world. From Nigeria to Europe to Middle East, the ripple effects are now beginning to be felt in all of these places. So let's start with the numbers because this is where things begin to get serious. Dangote Refinery is not just a big refinery, it is historic. The Dangote Refinery has a refining capacity of 650,000 barrels of crude oil per day. To put that into perspective, it is the largest single train refinery in the world, bigger than most refineries in the whole of Europe, and it is capable of meeting Nigeria's 100% fuel demand with excess for exports. But here is where things get very interesting. Nigeria is one of the largest crude oil producer in the world, but yet Nigeria is always importing refined crude products such as fuel, diesel, jet fuel. So what's changed? Dangote did not just build a refinery, Dangote built an entire ecosystem. He built deep sea port access, he built pipelines, he built storage terminals, and also built petrochemicals units. This means that the refinery is not just producing fuel, diesel, jet fuel, petrochemicals. It is also controlling logistics, it is controlling storage, supply chains, and also pricing. But before Dangote Refinery came into place, Nigeria was importing fuel worth billions of dollars every year. This had three major consequences. Number one, constant pressure on our foreign exchange. Number two, fuel scarcity. Number three, heavy subsidy burdens on the Nigerian government. Nigeria, a country of over more than 200 million people, is no longer competing for imported fuel again at the global market. This alone can change the global energy demand dynamics. Because when a major exporter exits the market, global suppliers loses a key customer, excess supply starts to build somewhere else, and prices begin to shift. This is already affecting traders in Europe and Asia who rely heavily on Nigeria importing their refined crude products. Now, let us move to Europe. For many years, European refineries have been exporting large amounts of refined crude products to Nigeria. This was a profitable route, but now the market for the European traders is shrinking very bad. Dangote Refinery has stepped in as a local supplier, replacing the European suppliers. And here is the real twist. Dangote is not just competing locally, he is competing globally. Because this refinery can produce fuel, diesel, jet fuel, and petrochemicals. And it can export them at a very competitive price, low cost of logistics, and massive economics of scale. This creates a new kind of competition, and European refineries are now facing reduced export demand, tighter profit margins, increased competition from Africa. So in simple terms, Dangote Refinery is not just serving Nigeria locally, it is serving the world globally. Now, let us talk about the prices. Fuel pricing globally depends on delicate balance between supply and demand. Now, imagine adding a mega refinery to that. This will increase global supply, reduce major imports from a major customer, export refined products to a new regions. That's a triple impact, and here is what happens. More supplies enters the market, demand from import-dependent countries drops drastically, and then competition increases among exporters. This combination can stabilize price, reduce price spikes, and shift regional pricing benchmarks. Already, analysts are watching how Dangote Refinery could affect markets in West Africa, in Asia, in Europe, and in America. Another major effect Dangote placed is on shipping and trading routes. Before Dangote Refinery came into place, fuel was shipped from Europe to West Africa. Tankers followed predictable routes. Ports in Nigeria handled massive import volumes. But now everything is changing because with Dangote Refinery, tankers may now move from Nigeria instead of to Nigeria. New trade routes are forming and shipping companies are now adapting. This has implications for freight costs, shipping demand, and port revenues. Even maritime logistics companies are now watching Nigeria very closely. Because for the first time in history, Nigeria is now net exporter of refined crude products. Now, let us bring it back home to Nigeria. The refinery is not just affecting global markets, it is also reshaping Nigeria's energy and also reshaping Nigeria's economy. This is how, because reduced imports will also reduce the demand for foreign exchange. Increased exports will even bring in more dollars into the country. And lastly, local refinery will now bring in more jobs for the country. Over time, this strengthens Nigeria's currency, and when a country's currency is stabilized, it gains more economic influence, it attracts investments, it makes the country not to be vulnerable to global shocks. This is how infrastructure translates into geopolitical power. Dangote Refinery is not just an energy project, it is a geopolitical weapon and also an economic weapon. Now, let me zoom out to the African continent. For decades, Africa exported crude oil and imported refined products. This created a dependency cycle, and Dangote is beginning to break that cycle. Now, Africans can now source their fuel locally, they can now trade regionally, and dependency on Europe and also Asia reduced drastically. This could lead to stronger African economies, better regional integration, and increased industrialization. In fact, Dangote Refinery could inspire similar mega projects across the African continent. And if that happens, Nigeria could shift from raw materials exporter to refined products powerhouse. But we should make no mistakes, because global energy companies are watching Nigeria closely. Because Dangote has changed the game in 3 different ways. It has reduced reliance on international refineries, it has introduced itself as a powerful competitor, and it has shifted the bargaining power of Nigeria towards producing nations. Now, companies that once controlled the energy sector in Nigeria and in Africa are now facing a new reality. They must find new markets, compete with the local giants, and also adjust pricing strategies. This is because Dangote pattern could be replicated across all African continents. And if more countries follow this path, the global energy sector could face serious disruptions. Now, let us be realistic. This is not a movie and this is not a perfect story for Nigeria and Africa. There are risks involved in this kind of things. Operational challenges, supply chain issues, regulatory pressures, global oil pricing volatility. Also, the refinery success depends on various things, which are consistent crude supply, efficient operations, stable government policies. If any of these fail, this could have an effect on the refinery. But even with these risks, one thing is very, very clear. The refinery has reached a stage where it cannot be ignored. So what happens next if Dangote Refinery continues to refine and supply the world? We could see Nigeria becoming a next exporter of refined crude products, reducing fuel imports very, very much, and global refinery competition intensify. And in the long term, we could be facing a new global order on energy. One where developing nations processes more of their own resources, global trade flows become more balanced, economic power becomes more disrupted. This is bigger than oil. It is about control of resources, control of value chains, and ultimately control of economic destiny. So the next time about to hear Dangote Refinery, don't just think it is just a Nigerian project. Think of it as a global force. A refinery that is not just producing fuel but shifting markets, shifting power, and redefining what is possible in Africa. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and also make sure comment your thoughts.